comes.
Yes, I didn't see you when you opened here.
Yes.
Yes.
Everybody who comes, how often they come, and whenever they come is welcome and appreciated for the learning. Exactly. Right. For the exactly. And also no vengeance. But the point is we are all here, right, to learn the beautiful teachings of our sages. And the fact that another person comes in when there are so many millions of Jews who would never even open up the Mishnah in their life. Yeah. If someone came for only one class, they are already above the average, right? What's that? Sorry. But let's not push it. I'm not going to say tzaddik just yet, but they were above average. They're above average. But the average when it comes to Jewish learning is not so high. Although there are more opportunities now than ever before in Jewish history. It's amazing the time we live in. With, that in mind, we are continuing on Ketubot, chapter 7, Mishnah 7. So it should say 7-7 at the top of your page. And I'm hoping we're going to get through chapter 7. I've got chapter 8 ready to go if we finish. So don't think we're getting out of here early just if we finish. We're good? Good. All right. I'm going to point to my left, and as always, if you'd like to read, please read. If you'd like to pass, just look to the person next to you and ask them nicely to carry on.
All set?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
If a man betrothed a woman on condition she was under no vows, and she was found to be under vows, she's not betrothed.
Okay, let's make sure we understand this. Actually, we're going to do this timeline for a number of different points later on if we get to chapter 8. So let's make sure we understand that we have different zones in a woman's life. It's also in a man's life, but we're dealing mostly in Ketubot with what effect this has on the woman's status. So we have single, betrothed, and married. I suppose we can add in divorced or widowed if we get to that far, but let's leave that at the moment. Okay, so betrothed, and I do prefer that word in English than engaged, because in Hebrew, betrothed is more engaged than engaged is in modern English. Right? Remember, once you do the ring, that's a ring, once you do that part of the marriage, betrothal, right, then you are now technically considered kind of married. If you fool around, it's called adultery. If there needs to be a divorce, you have to have a get, you have to have the official divorce document. So this is kind of like a middle ground, which, as we're going to see, can confuse issues before getting married when everything is 100% clear. Okay? So the question is, while she was single, she got betrothed, and he found out after they were betrothed that she already had a vow that, of course, would continue during that time period. But he didn't know that when he wanted to marry her. When he said, "Will you marry me?" harayat, the marriage formula, and he offered her the ring, and she accepted it. And he did it, as it says, on the condition that she has not taken any vows. And she said, "Nope, I've taken no vows." And they get married, or not married, sorry, they get betrothed. And then he finds out, actually, she does have a vow. The betrothal never happened. It is annulled, right? It is disappeared.
But a vow to betroth someone else.
No, just a vow.
What's
That's
that?
a vow or betroth someone else.
So in as we're going to see in a few other places as well, if you make a betrothal on a condition, right, with a tanai, and it turns out that the person was either mistaken or lying, then it is considered to be an error. It is a ta'ud, and that nullifies the purchase. It's like if you go to buy a dog, and the person says, "Oh yes, this is a purebred German Shepherd," right? And you take the dog and you get it home and you give it a 22andMe, DNA test. Yeah, just spit in this, and you send it off, and he comes back and it says that it's 45% Great Dane. Then you're allowed to take the dog back to the kennel and say, "I want my money back," right? Because it was fraud. You sold me something that wasn't true. Well, guess what? In relationships, there is also a presenting of something that isn't true. Now, well, yes, and this is a breach of trust, absolutely. So if you are getting married, and remember our topic at the moment is about vowing and the relationship between a woman's vow and her husband's right to cancel it and all of that. So the question is, what happens if she has a vow before she gets married and he marries her on the condition, betroths her on the condition that she doesn't have vows? If it turns out she does, then the betrothal is just gone. Right? No get needed. It is simply annulled. It disappears.
Doesn't matter which kind of vow.
If it was on the condition of no vows, it doesn't matter what kind of vow. If he makes a condition of no vows about vegetables and she makes a vow about fruit, then that would not nullify it. It is as clear as whatever the conditions were that he explained. Now, for that to work, the condition has to have been shared. Right? He can't say, oh, well, I only married you because I thought you didn't have any vows. He has to say explicitly, I will only betroth you on the condition that X, Y, Z. And then if X, Y, and Z turn out to be wrong, that's when this kicks in. Right? So you can't just say, oh, well, I made an assumption. No assumptions. This is all explicit. And in fact, in the ancient world and even in the modern world, people would write out these conditions in great detail. And in fact, this is more of what we would recognize as a modern prenuptial agreement of talking about, all the different things that are assumed about each other and are being testified as being true. And if it turns out to have been wrong, then there is a legal fix. Make sense? Okay.
So, if he married her without making any conditions, and she was found to be under vows, she leaves without her ketubot.
Okay, so if he married her, this is now marriage, right? And it goes all the way to there, but there were no conditions made, but he finds out that there were conditions made, then he has to divorce her. But because the vows were not revealed to him at the time of the betrothal or the marriage, right, all the way through this whole process, she is not allowed to keep her ketubah because it is considered that she was dishonest in presenting herself.
But he never asked her if she was.
So
it's not dishonesty when you don't ask.
Welcome to Bill Clinton's solution for the military and gays. Don't ask, don't tell.
But it's hidden.
Exactly. It's not a question of overt dishonesty, but it is a question of how do you present yourself? Do you present yourself as somebody who has a restriction? Which, remember, the vow would have already kicked in. He has no ability of changing it. Right? If her vow is, I'll never spin wool, as we saw, that was a major issue. Now, it doesn't mean that he has to divorce her. Right? Remember, like always, this is worst case scenario. So imagine he finds out sometime after they got married that she's made a vow that she will never go outside when it's raining. Okay, they live in Florida, that's a problem. And he didn't sign up for that. Right? That was not something that he expected. Maybe he should have asked, maybe he shouldn't have asked, but it is going to create a huge problem. Maybe he finds out that she made a vow that she would always cut her left toenails before her right toenails. That's probably not going to be a problem for him. He may still be a little upset that she didn't mention that she had this vow, stupid vow, but that she had a vow, and he can decide whether he wants to divorce her over this or not. It's just because he could divorce her without a ketubah doesn't mean that he should, is what I'm trying to say. But if he does, and she comes to the court is going to say, sorry, you can't collect your ketubah in this situation.
How long does he have to divorce her?
How long does he have to divorce her?
After he finds out.
There isn't a time limit.
So if he divorces her 30 years later, she's gone without a ketubah?
I think that then there would be an argument that he had come to accept and live, but then that would get into the particulars of that case. And it also would probably depend if it was toenails or rain. All right. Line 2.
Line 2. If a woman was betrothed on condition that she has no bodily defects, and she was found to have defects, she's not betrothed.
Okay, welcome to the real world. All right. There's a whole long list of what a bodily defect might be considered, which is also the same defects that are used for disqualifying the Kohanim from being the public officiants at the sacrifices.
Those are exterior. We're talking with the defects interior.
Right. So again, this is about a condition. So if you make a condition of, I will only marry you if you have an innie belly button, not an outie belly button. And it turns out, because you're not, remember, old days, you're not seeing her naked before this.
Exactly.
We're actually going to talk about the naked thing in a minute, but at the moment, let's just leave it as you're not seeing her naked. If you make the condition and it turns out that it was wrong, then your betrothal was an error.
What happened is your family, her family has a history of heart problems, and that's a problem, and it's a physical problem,
Right.
And she knows that there's a tendency that everyone died at the age 40, okay?
Right.
But she doesn't want to share because she feels uncomfortable, whatever.
Right. So
Is that a condition
if it
for-
is an explicit condition regarding her physical well-being, and she lies about it, then yes, that is considered to be a mistaken betrothal, and it is canceled. But do not pass go. Do not collect $200. It's simply dissolved.
lies, but if she doesn't say that she has because she doesn't ask.
No. Remember, this is the first part here, right? We're only on the first part of this section. Is if he married her with the condition.
With the condition.
Right, with the condition.
Okay.
Right. And again, the bodily defects in general, that list is considered the same list as for the Kohanim. But if you wanted to add an additional condition about no heart defects or no diabetes in your family or no schizophrenia or whatever, if she was deliberately being deceptive about it, then it is a mistake, right? Some things like that are not so easy, right? Having a third toe, you know, like the coming out back of the 3 toes coming out the back of your foot, she would know that. But if she doesn't know whether or not there's diabetes in the family, maybe, you know, her great uncle had it and she never told her. But we're talking here more about things that should have been known, should have been revealed because it was a condition. However, we get to the no conditions on the next line.
If he married her without making any conditions, and she was found to have defects, she leaves without her ketubot.
Okay? Please.
I'm sorry.
Because?
Because it's not her mistake, it's not her fault that, for example, without condition, the family has a health issue condition, so you want to divorce her and punish her. Not only she has a health issue, but also now you don't have tuba, and also now it's much more difficult for you to remarry.
Which is why you marry somebody on the condition or with the condition that you know that they have this issue. Right. So for example, as I'm sure some of you know, but it'll be news to others. Right. I have a condition called Pullen's anomaly. Right. It's a genetic condition. It means I've got no muscle on the left-hand side. This is just bone on this side. See, skin over here. Not a whole lot of muscle, but it's muscle and skin, just skin over bone here. And my left hand is smaller than my right hand. Right. That's not like I'm playing with my hands there. The left one is actually smaller than the right. I made sure that my wife knew about this before we got married. I'm not going to surprise her and say, oh, by the way, I've got this genetic issue. And thankfully, it is, as far as genetic issues go, a fairly minor one in the grand scheme of things. But it is something that is part of my genes, is part of potentially the hereditary, although neither of my children have it. And that's the kind of thing that you want your spouse to know. Mm-hmm. And if you know, you are kind of under an obligation to share that before you get married to someone. Right? This is about cards on the table before you join two people as husband and wife. This is thing. Now, what? It's transparency, exactly. You know, I always say one of the reasons why Judaism says that you use a simple, clear band when getting married rather than one with jewels or other things is because everyone understands what it is. Right? A diamond may not be a diamond. It may be glass. It may be cubic zirconia. Most of us aren't experts. Most of us can evaluate this and say it's 5 ounces, right? or whatever. I don't know what that is. But most of us could if we wanted. And that's the idea, that when you get married, you present clearly who you are, and the other person has a clear assessment of who you are. It may sound mercantile, like we're buying and selling each other. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And we are buying into a partnership. with the other person. And if you were going to go into a business partnership with someone else to open up a new store or whatever, you'd want to know what other debts they have in their life, what other liabilities they have, what's their experience in this kind of job. If you're going to build
family, they're going into.
well, I'm talking about just a business partnership.
Yeah.
You'd want to know at least the basics. But getting married to someone and you don't know like what job they have, or you don't know what their bank account looks like, or you don't know how they are with money, you don't know what they're like, what they plan to do with kids, how many kids do they have, how do they plan to discipline the kids when you have them, what education do you want them? If you don't know those questions, don't get married, right? Not never get married, but answer them first before you get married. In the ancient world, yes, just like in the modern world, people cared about physical appearance. Welcome to human beings. If we weren't this vain, the world would be very different. But we are, and we still are, and in some ways, I think we're even more obsessed with bodily appearance than we used to be. Even though we should understand the causes of bodily, disfigurement more clearly now. But neither here nor there. If the husband wanted to, then he could object to a defect that was discovered after this point. And yes, if it had been kept hidden, then this would be a problem. And again, we're talking about, as it says in Part B, the defects which disqualify the priest or the defects which disqualify the woman. So this is to protect her. So for example, if she has a defect that is just, she blushes more than is usual, he can't say, oh, I'm going to divorce you without a ketubah because I didn't expect that. Because that's not a known significant defect that would be used as one of the criteria for the Kohanim. Therefore, there's no reason why she would have thought to have mentioned or even have noticed that this was something unique to herself. So that's why it is specifically limiting this to not the defects that he cares about, but the objective list of defects that the Torah already gave us for the Kohanim. Good. Okay.
The next line says the same thing.
What's that?
The next line says.
Well, which is why I said I read it for you. Yes, we needed to get that out there. All right. 7-8, though, we're going to take this question of bodily defects and go into more detail. Maybe you'll feel better. Maybe you'll feel worse. Let's find out.
What about the guy? I mean, we're going on.
We're getting there. We're getting to her complaints about him. We'll get.
If she had bodily defects while she was still in her father's house, her father must produce proof that these defects arose after she had been betrothed, and that consequently it was the husband's field that was flooded.
Okay, because the one question we didn't handle was if she was no defect here, and then she is defect here, where did the defect happen? If it happened even a little bit before the betrothal, then everything we just said kicks in and, everything's off, or it was a mistake and blah, blah, blah. If it happened after the betrothal, tough luck, buddy. That's your problem. Right? If she didn't grow that second head until after you put the ring on it. And that's what the phrase the husband's field is flooded, right? It basically means it's your luck. Right? Bad luck. Sorry, you already bought it. It's yours. Right? It's like if you buy a car and you drive out of the parking lot and someone hits you, the dealer is not giving you another car. Right? That's already yours. And if you've already bought it, you handed over the money and they gave you the title, the keys, and as you're walking out, a meteor comes down and blows up the car. Sorry, it's your car, even if you never drove it 1 foot. Right, which would be the equivalent of betrothal before marriage, right? You've never actually been married, but that's where the defect appeared. Tough. Right? That's just what happens. And then that's where we are. Onward.
If she was brought into her husband's domain and the defect was discovered there, the husband must produce proof that these defects existed before she had been betrothed, and that consequently his bargain was made in error. The words of Rabbi Meir.
Okay, so this is the general rule, and we're going to get a little bit of a narrowing of it, but by the sages in just a second. But what they're basically saying is, I need a different color. Right? Is domain. If she's in her father's house, or if she's in her husband's, who has the burden of proof? And the answer is wherever she is.
Oh, wherever she is.
Right? If she's in her father's home, meaning she's betrothed but hasn't actually been married and moved into her husband's house, then her father has to prove that the defect did not happen until after the betrothal. On the contrary, if she's already married and now we suddenly notice the second head, the husband has to prove she had the second head before we got married. Now, obviously, second head is something that you probably would have noticed under the chuppah. And so that's going to lead us now to what the sages are going to try and use to refocus that rule between father and husband domain. But everyone follow the general idea that wherever she is, that's the person that's responsible for proving it. So if she's already married, her father now doesn't have to prove anything. The husband has to prove it. And if she hasn't finished the marriage process, the father has to prove it, not the husband. Okay. But the sages say,
to what does this apply? Only to concealed defects. But with regards to defects that are exposed, he cannot make any claim.
Right? If she's actually got a second head, or if she's got, an extra finger or something like that, then the husband can't say, well, I didn't notice that until we got home from the honeymoon. Right? And then, no, that you have no claim. If you show up and she's got an extra finger, you can't say I never noticed. That it was exposed, it was there. However, if it is something concealed with, underneath clothing that would normally not be seen in public, then he would still have a claim. However,
and if there was a bathhouse in the town, he cannot make any claim, even about concealed defects, because he is assumed to have had her examined by his female relatives.
Okay.
That's interesting.
Welcome to the world of when you're setting someone up to get married, right? So you want him to marry Sarah, all right? And everybody's saying, oh, Sarah would be a good match for you. Well, guess what? Reuben, the husband's mother or sister or aunt, is going to go to the bathhouse, and they're going to check Sarah out to find out what she looks like under her clothes. And what do you want? What fairy tale? What fairy tale do you live in?
No, privacy, come on.
You think that people of the same gender, didn't get naked in front of each other?
Well, you can let it, like you would be like a cow, like in front of everyone.
I'm not saying that it's polite, but what I am saying, and what the rabbis are saying, is it is what people do, right? I mean, even now, if you're in, go to a gym, you shower in front of all the other guys, right? And I don't know if women have the same kind of thing for gyms anymore, but
I never check what's happening with other people.
Yeah. But if you knew your sister was going to marry the guy next to you in the locker room, you wouldn't look a little more? Right? Of course. Or if you knew God heard, you knew your daughter was going to marry him. And you saw let's take something that was concealed. You saw that he had like a giant, Hell's Angel tattoo on his back. You'd be like, do you know that he's got you would be on the phone instantly. You wouldn't say, it's his private time in the gym. I shouldn't have looked. I just let her find out on the wedding night. Right. So but this is very much to her benefit, because we started off by saying basically anything he finds out about, he can claim, this is a problem. But now we have rolled it back where it's only place where this might be an issue would be if she was coming from some other town where he had no relative or there was no bathhouse, which who wants to live there, to be able to check. Now, pretty much every defect is considered to be public knowledge by the time she gets to the chuppah, and therefore he can't make any claims against her. So although he technically on the books has claims against her for defects, the society has structured itself that it will be very, very hard for him to ever make those claims stand up in court, because he should have known. Either he would have seen it himself or one of his relatives would have seen it.
What about if you bring your relatives to court to say, no, we didn't check?
It's considered to have been, they did check. Right? The normative behavior is considered to be dominant even if a person would try to pretend they weren't normative. right? So everything is ruled according to local custom and Jewish law. Well, almost everything. So like weights and measures, the way that you treat your workers, most famously, is all covered by local custom. So you're not going to say, we were the one family who refused. We went to the bathhouse like this, right? And we didn't look at anyone. It's simply unbelievable that you would be going against the entire norm of that community. And so it would be considered either dishonest, or that you were negligent, or that you are going to take a false oath swearing that you didn't, which is now introducing a whole new level of transgression.
Rabbi, a woman before she gets married, she has to go to the mikvah, right?
Of course.
So that's.
But the mikvah, no. This is
No?
not talking about a mikvah. This is talking about a bathhouse.
But that was the mikvah, basically.
No, a bathhouse is where you go to get the schmutz off. A mikvah is where you go to get the tum'ah, to get the ritual impurity off.
It's the same place.
They might be connected, but historically they weren't always.
Yeah.
I mean, you can go to a bathhouse even when you don't need to go to the mikvah, and as long as you are free of in the English barriers between the water and your skin. You know, you're not covered in like caked mud or something. You can go to the mikvah without going to a bathhouse. Right? I mean, think about all those people who lived through most of our history that lived after the times of the Mishnah, when bathhouses were not common. If you lived in Poland, you lived in France, you lived in England for most of the Middle Ages and all through the Renaissance, people didn't have bathhouses. You were lucky if you got a bath occasionally, and the Jewish people more than most, but that still, you didn't have a bathhouse, and you still would go to the mikvah when you needed to go to the mikvah, because otherwise you would no longer be able to be together. So bathhouses were not identical to mikvah. They're not the same thing. And the mikvah people, the attendants, wouldn't necessarily be your relatives checking out the person on your behalf before a wedding. So they were distinct.
Okay, I have a case. What if this girl tells the fiance, I don't know how to call it.
Fiance, yeah.
I have a big ear, but she's wearing all the time the cover.
Right.
I have a big ear. And he said, it doesn't matter, we can get married. Then they get married. I said, okay, now can you show me the ear? And
He's like,
she
oh
said,
my!
wait, she said, are you sure you want? Yes, because we already married. So, and I was already accepted like that. So, okay. So, are you sure you're not gonna laugh? No, I'm not gonna laugh. Okay, I said, okay. So she put this one like this, and then this piece of ear come on. And he started laughing. And she said, no, I'm not gonna show you the bigger ear.
So if it's really something that she is worried that he cannot accept without seeing it. So first of all, historically, there were opportunities that they could look at each other, not, other things. But if absolutely necessary, his female relatives could check. And they would be allowed to inspect so that the family would know what was going to be joining their family. And if she had ears, that hang real low and tie them in the knot, tie them in a bow, and throw them over your shoulder like you tie them on a shoulder, then, sorry, it's the only song I could remember. You don't know that song? No. Do your ears hang low? Do they waggle to and fro? Can you tie them in a knot? Can you tie them in a bow? Okay. Hey, in the 70s, it was a great song.
Yeah.
In the American culture.
Elementary school, yeah.
In a different culture, it was a different song.
I'm sure. But, so yes, then you would have someone else inspect. So if there was really a big problem that was that much of a concern, you would make sure to reveal it to his family to make sure that there was understanding. But chapter 7, Mishnah 9, we're now going to talk about the other side.
A man in whom defects have arisen after marriage cannot be forced to divorce his wife.
What? A man in whom defects have arisen after marriage cannot be forced to divorce his wife. So first of all, what does this tell us? Which is a woman has the right not to marry her husband if he has a defect, right? If the woman says, oh, here's the guy we'd like you to marry, and she looks at him and he's got giant ears or whatever, she can say, no, I'm not marrying someone who's like that, right? Or I'm not marrying someone who has one of the most common not common, one of the most famous issues in the Kohanim was damage down here, right? If that happens after the fact, right? Farming accident, attacked by bandits, whatever, she can't divorce him because he's now damaged there, is what this is saying. She cannot force the court to force him to give her a divorce. Everyone with me? So we're talking about after the marriage where the defect, she can always refuse to marry him if she doesn't like the defect before it happens. We're good?
Yeah.
Okay. But even with that, Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is going to push back.
Rabban Shimon ben Gamaliel said, to what does this apply to minor defects? But with regard to major defects, he can be forced to divorce her.
All right. So Rabban Shimon ben Gamliel is of the opinion that, okay, yeah, for little things, but if it's major, then she can go to the court and say, look, I can't live with this. I need him to give me a divorce. I need to be released because of this defect. Now we're going to continue this topic in the next Mishnah when we talk about a little bit more about who gets forced to divorce their wives.
Which opinion is the
We want to get 710 down because it goes into more detail.
And she gets her ketubah, right?
But yes, this would be a regular divorce. Okay. So Mishnah 10 of chapter 7 goes into more details on this. Who divorces, for what cause might there be for a divorce of defects?
On the male side.
And this is on the male side, yes.
Okay.
Mishnah 10. These are the ones who are forced to divorce their wives. One who is afflicted with boils.
All right, remember, you all remember boils from the plagues of Egypt, right? Giant, big, bumpy things, leaking out on top. Right? It's horrible. And this was not an uncommon skin problem in the ancient world. And it's, be thankful you live in the 21st century. Right? It's a blessing.
One who has a polypus.
Okay, so lots of different discussions of this. It's apparently a Greek word that has to do with some sort of polyp, we would say in modern English. The Talmud identifies it as being like something that might have been on the nose in the ancient Greek, or it might have been something that causes an incredibly foul odor that makes him just horribly, horribly smelly. So that is what we're talking about with polypus.
Okay.
Onward, yep.
A gatherer of dog feces for the treatment of hides.
All right, so it's still literally just a gatherer, but a gatherer is the technical term for the guy who goes around picking up dog stuff, right? And not just because he's walking his dog, but he's gathering it in order to use it as how you make leather, as how you turn the skin of animals into leather. That was, that and urine were two big things used for leather. Now, here, what's the defect?
He smells.
Yeah. You think this guy is ever going to be fun to be around? Right? I mean, this is what he handles day in, day out. And remember, they didn't have giant yellow gloves and they didn't have, hazmat suits, and they certainly didn't have blasting showers and soap that would clean you down at the end of every day's work. So this would be an unpleasant person who would be stained by his job. Onward.
A coppersmith or a tanner.
All right, and both of those as well are also bad jobs, right? The tanner is the one who actually makes the leather, and the coppersmith is the person smelting the copper ore and turning it into to metal.
So they had to be single for the rest of their life?
They didn't have to be. They had to get somebody who would accept them. Right?
Puts a lot of perfume.
What's that? Or install a modern bathroom. Or, I mean, there's all sorts of solutions. Right. There's all sorts of issues. But there are solutions. But the question is whether you can force a person to stay with someone under these circumstances. It's not, do you have to be divorced? It's, could the woman petition for a divorce under these circumstances?
Who are the owners of the bath? Were public or the city or private?
It depended on where you were and which part of history. So sometimes they were just like, in Mishnah in Israel, usually they were part of the public bath system. Right? So it was like it was like a city function to have good bathhouses. In other parts of the world, they would be privately owned, and then you would pay, to go.
They didn't have lakes or anything?
What?
They didn't use lakes?
Well, no, of course you could use a lake, but I don't know whether you've ever tried to take a bath in a lake as opposed to going to a proper like heated bathhouse and taking a bath. If you've ever compared the two, the bathhouse is much better.
Right. I just
It's better both. Yeah, I mean, it's better because it's more comfortable, but it's also better because it's just a thorough clean. If you've been to, well, the one that people probably have seen the most is Masada has the bathhouses with all the different pools of hot water and cold water and steam rooms that just make you sweat more. The Roman time period, which is when the Mishnah was being written, they knew how to take a bath.
Yeah.
And that's what they're talking about.
It seems like they, based on what I've heard, it seems like they didn't have much access to these baths.
What do you mean?
You just said like they couldn't take one every day.
No. That was talking about the later time period. Middle Ages, saying that in the Middle Ages, people did not have access to that kind of bath facility. And people were lucky to take even cold baths occasionally. But, and Jewish people did usually take baths more often than most. And I was explaining that, what?
Where?
Lake, river, or bring water from the well, and you can wash yourself. It's not like a bath, like it wasn't like, you know, a giant porcelain tub, but it was, you know, you'd stand and you take a sponge and you just wash yourself.
Why didn't you use the mikveh?
Because the mikveh wasn't designed to be a bath.
Yeah, but you could choose stones, one stone.
Well, when I say it wasn't designed to be a bath, it also wasn't designed to stay clean. Right? The water of the mikveh wasn't always great water to hang out in. Even to this day, depending upon where you go and which mikveh you're using, the mikveh can be a little murky. It's not like crystal clear fresh water sometimes, because even if it's murky, it's still a mikveh. It's still kosher. So, yeah, a mikveh wasn't always a good place to get clean. I've heard some people when they do toveling, the immersion of utensils, that they will put them in the mikveh and then take them home and wash them really, really well, because they said if you drop it in that mikveh, you'll never find it again. Right? It'll like disappear into the cloud. So some mikvehs are not exactly nice. And certainly in the ancient world, when they had less plumbing and circulation, the mikvehs also were not always going to be comfortable bath experiences. Okay, so let's continue our list of, we finished our list, but now we're on whether.
Yeah, whether they were in such a condition before they married, or whether they arose after they had married.
Okay, go ahead and read part 2, because that's going to give us that. This is Rebbe Meir.
And concerning all these, Rabbi Meir said, although the man made a condition with her that she accept him despite these defects, she may nevertheless say, I thought I could accept him.
Okay.
Now I cannot accept him.
Okay, so this is going to get into the more nitty gritty. So it seems to be the general rule is, yes, if one of these horrible things happen after he's been married to her, then she is allowed to petition the court to force him to give her a divorce. Right, so this is, the defect happens here for him. Right, this is the husband defect. Then she can ask for a petition. What they're arguing about now with Rabbi Meir and the sages is what happens if there's a defect here and she says it's okay.
I thought the defect could be left over people.
Well, it could be anywhere. Yeah, it could be anywhere, right? I mean, it's long-running defect. So he says, hey, baby, I'm a coppersmith. Want to marry me? And she's like, a coppersmith, yeah, you know, you're kind of cute. Okay, right? Or you can always provide for the family because everyone needs copper. And she agrees. And they're married for 6 months, for a year. And it's just so bad. She didn't understand how bad it would be to be married to a coppersmith. This is where Rebbe Meir and the sages are disagreeing. Rebbe Meir says, even if she agreed, and after the married found out that she didn't like it, she is allowed to petition for a divorce and to be divorced by the court.
With Ketubot.
With the Ketubot. But the sages, the Chachamim, and therefore the ruling opinion, says no. If she agreed, she's stuck. Right? That you agreed to this. Now, if it happened after you got married, you know, I married him when he was a lawyer, and now he's picking up dog stuff, then yes, you can petition for a divorce under those circumstances because you didn't sign up for that. But if you signed up for it, then you're kind of on the hook. What are we thinking? Make sense?
Mhm.
Okay. Just finish up.
3.
Yes. Sorry, I already explained 3, but go ahead and read it.
The sages say she must accept such a person against her will. The only exception being a man afflicted with boils, because she, by her intercourse, will enervate.
It's a really fancy English word meaning weaken. So what they're worried about here is that if he is covered in boils, when she is enjoying her wifely due, meaning that they are having sex together, it will be dangerous for him because of his illness. But since that means he can't be with her without endangering himself, then she has the right to have him divorce her because he is not doing what a husband should do. You look confused. Right? Apparently boils were considered to be, because they're like skin lesions.
So it's not transferable from
I
one
thought
It
person.
depends on the type.
I thought we want that just for her, not for him.
Well, it depends. If we're like
It's contagious.
really nasty, but if you are breaking the boils and causing them to open and become infected because they're exposed to the air, then he's the one who can get infected and die. But yes, in certain types of boils, she might get as a contagion,
Yeah.
but he would be the first one to die if he's the one already suffering from them. So that was what the Talmud was concerned about, or what the rabbis were concerned about according to the Talmud. Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Part 4.
It once happened to Sidon, at Sidon, that a tanner died, and he had a brother who was also a tanner.
All right. So what's the issue here? Yibum. Right. We have a woman married to one brother. They die, and presumably they have no children. So she is supposed to get married to the other brother, right? The Levirate marriage. But what's the problem? The first husband was a tanner. The second husband was a tanner.
What was the thing? So
The person who makes leather.
Painted.
Hmm?
Paint. Usually tanner is the one who makes the leather and also paint them.
Not so much the painting, but turning the skin into leather. So you're using lots of horrible things like the stuff the dogs were leaving behind, and urine and lye and other stuff, and of course rotting animal skin.
My aunt used to live in Netanya,
Mhm.
near a place like this.
Right.
That were making leather.
Yep.
And it was horrible.
Oh yes.
Just to pass
Oh.
by.
There's halakha about where a tanner's facility can be,
Could be.
right? It has to be out of the town,
Town.
downwind. You don't get to just open this in your backyard, because it is a bad thing to have. There are regulations about where a tanner can be in your town.
So these leather shoes and leather purses were done that way?
They still are. Now,
No, I have plastic.
now, I will say that nowadays they usually use straight chemicals rather than getting it from urine or from dogs. But it is still a very, very smelly and difficult process to turn skin into leather.
And those couches in the house, are they
Yeah.
leather couches?
Yeah, they're like I said, nowadays most things that you'll find, at least in this country, are made using chemicals to do the same job. Because there was the chemicals in the It was the chemicals in the urine, it was the chemical in the dog droppings that were important. It wasn't the actual droppings. So once we found a way to make those chemicals, we don't need to collect it from dogs anymore. But it still uses very harsh and very nasty chemicals to make the leather. Yeah, you do not want to be in the leather business if you can avoid it. Okay, so what's the punchline?
Okay. Okay.
The sages
The
said,
sages said, she may say, I was able to accept your brother, but I cannot accept you.
okay, so even though Yibum
Said.
normally says that she should get married to the other brother and that it's kind of like already automatically betrothed, we don't hold her to that, because she's allowed to say, look, I accepted your brother, the tanner, but I'm not doing it again, right? I'm not going to be married to another tanner. Just do chalitza, let me be free, and we'll call it quits. Because we can't force her to marry another tanner, even though it would be doing Yibum.
Double gentleman.
Yeah, it's not a good position to be in. And if I'm not mistaken, that brings us to the end of chapter 7. Okay, we got a little bit of time. Let's go ahead and start chapter 8.
If you do Yibum, she would only collect the Ketubot from the dead brother, right? You don't protect the Ketubot.
Yes, yeah. It's part of the deceased brother's estate. All right, we're going to leave up the timeline because that's going to be important. We're not worried about defects anymore. Oh. Okay.
It was fun.
Mm-hmm.
When we get to the first one.
All right. Who's ready to do some property? All right.
Real estate.
People have stuff,
Oh, that's so cool.
right? People have stuff. And yes, Natan, you're going to get to kick us off on this. Where's my chapter 8? Okay. Now,
Perfect timing.
Yeah.
remember we talked about before that a woman's, what a woman produces inside the marriage is considered to be her husband's property, right? That's part of the family pot, if you will. But the question we're going to have here is, what happens if she has money from before the marriage? Or what happens if she gains money either betrothal or married in a different way than just she made it, than she just
We
made the
spoke
work?
about that.
A little.
She can keep it.
So this is going to go into a lot more detail than that general principle. So this is going to fill in a lot of those questions, and it's going to make a whole bunch of more new questions. So chapter 8 is going to cover this whole issue of how can she own property and how does it get used in the family during this whole time period. So again, remember, single, betrothed, married. Remembering those 3 steps is important. And I don't think we're going to get to death tonight, but I think they're leaving. That's good. Okay. So, Natan, you ready?
A woman to whom property fell before she was betrothed.
All right. So that means she's single. All right. She's not married yet. She just got some new property. Yay. I should also point out, generally speaking, when it uses the term property, it is talking about real estate. Right? It is talking about land. It's not talking about money. It's not talking about a necklace. It's not talking about animals. It's generally talking about land. When it talks about those other things, it will mention those other things, right? But when it's talking about just property in general, it means land. Okay.
Not just a house in the city.
It could be a house in the city because that is property. But in general, the thing that they're most interested in is property that is productive, right? Farm property. That was the main thing a person would want to own, because that would produce more wealth and food. So you wanted property that was productive. The idea of having 10 acres just so you could look at the grass and watch the sunset, that's a complete waste. Plant some trees on that, put some corn there or something. Okay, so what's that?
I was gonna say, is that why in I think it was the book of Job, they talked about his wealth by basically his farm.
Exactly. That was what you were, was what you owned in productive land. And really, again, all the way up until the modern period, that was true for almost everybody throughout history. It was your farm that made you able to live another year. And if you had multiple farms, that's when you actually had extra money. All right, so she gets some money, she gets some property before she gets betrothed.
Bet Shammai and Bet Hillel agree that she may sell and she may give, and it is valid.
Okay, so she gets some property here, and she decides she wants to sell her orchard, or she wants to give her orchard to her friend. Totally fine. Her future husband has nothing he can say about it. It is entirely her property. Everyone's good on this, right? Because her future husband isn't even betrothed. Even if she is, what?
The only problem is the husband might change his mind.
But he hasn't betrothed. He hasn't betrothed her yet.
But still, he can think, what kind of a woman she doesn't want to share it with me.
Yes.
Why?
But-
Are you with her because her money?
Actually, hold on a second. Well, so Natan, I don't know if you've ever visited Earth, where people do get married for money.
Well, they have, and they don't.
But we are going to get to that about whether he would marry her for the money. But right now, again, we're talking about what he legally has a claim to.
No.
Even if they're planning to get married, right? Next week we're going to do the betrothal, and she's like, "Great! I just inherited this 500-acre farm, and I'm going to give it to this other guy." He can't stop her. Now, He can call off the wedding, he can be angry, he can do all those other things, but legally he can't go to the court and say she can't do that. When they get married, as you're going to see, he will have that power. So we're making a big distinction between once married and not married. And betrothal, we're going to see, is a little bit of a gray zone.
If it fell to her after she was betrothed, the Shammai say she may sell, but Hillel say she may not sell.
Okay, so if we're in the gray zone, then Beit Shammai says that she's still not married. Right? She's still not married. It doesn't belong to him yet. So, of course, she can sell it. Now, again, this is property that she got here during the betrothal.
But Beit Shammai is more consistent. Again, this
Right.
is the first time I agree more with Beit Shammai. Because,
Yes.
because in this way, for consistency, they are not married. So still, she's kind of free agent.
Okay. So this is the question then, and partly why Beit Hillel says, well, yeah, but she's in the process of getting married,
But it's not there.
but it's not there, and that's why. What is the halacha?
How would you say, Rabbi? If you honor, it's your problem, your bad luck.
Right.
Still, it's not titled.
Right.
Still, it's a free agent.
And that's exactly why the halacha is from Hillel, she shouldn't, but if she did, it's still legal.
Also, I agree with Beit Shammai.
Right. So Beit Shammai says, do whatever you want. It's all legal. Beit Hillel says, don't do it, but if you do, it's legal. Right. So he is discouraging, if you will, trying to say that you're prohibited from doing this, but if you do it anyway, then it is official and it is done because it is technically still entirely your property. So in a way, they both agree that it is her property. They're disagreeing about whether or not she should be actively discouraged by being prohibited by the rabbis from doing so.
Is there any penalty if she doesn't?
Well, if she does it knowingly, then that is a deliberate, what do you call it, a rejection of rabbinic law, and the usual punishment for that is flogging. If she knowingly does it anyway, even though Beit Hillel said don't do it, and we follow their ruling, then she could be flogged for being rebellious against the sages.
They say that it's not the most appropriate way, but you can do it.
But they still said she is prohibited.
But they can't hold it against the ketubah?
But they can't hold it against the ketubah. Okay, let's see what Rabbi Judah's response is.
She may not sell. Doesn't mean that she cannot sell. She may not sell.
No, in just a second. Or do you have the Hebrew there in front of you? Just a second. Right. Don't sell. It's not right. Don't sell. Right. She does not sell.
Yeah, but after I say
correct. Right. They both agree that the sale is upheld. And again, the sale is upheld. We're going to find out. We're going to find out in just a second that the sale not being upheld means the husband can come and take back whatever his wife sold. And that's the distinction that we're going to make here. Let's get a few more lines under our belt to see the broader picture. So continue with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion.
This and this agree that if she sold or if she gave,
Right.
it is valid. So it's
Right.
valid.
Keep going.
They cannot flog her. It's valid. I just said. Okay, Rabbi Yehuda said, they said before Rabbi Gamliel, since he acquired the woman, should he not acquire the property? He said to them, we are embarrassed regarding the new, and you impose on us the old.
Okay. What are we talking about here? So this is a beautiful little bit of sort of a glimpse behind the curtain of how the rabbis are thinking. So this comes to Rabban Gamliel, who's a later generation. And they say, well, wait a minute. If he's already betrothed her, then hasn't he already got her property? Right? Which is sort of what Beit Hillel's opinion is.
So
If you've betrothed her, then haven't you already kind of taken possession of the property? Right? Don't you already sort of own it? And what Rabban Gamliel is saying is, I'm not happy with either parts. Right? You're telling me that it's not right that he should, you're asking me, why can't he do it here? I'm not happy that he did it here. Right? I'm not happy that he gets to dispose of her property as he sees fit later on. And you're asking me about something that seems even less, that has less support for why he's able to do it. Right? Rabban Gamliel is very much saying, I am frustrated by the precedent, by the halakha, that says that he has the right at any point to take care, to dispose of her property in different ways. So why are you asking me about this point, which he should have even less reason for having that authority? Does that make sense? Good, because we're going to see that quote again at the end of this Mishnah in a slightly different case. But let's get to that part. Let's go to if she came after the marriage, right? So we've had single, betrothed, now property coming to her when she's married.
Now, if he's uncomfortable, can he? I know that precedent is very important, but is there any way that he cannot change it? I know that you cannot go against the Torah, the previous generation, but is there any other, maybe doing a reinterpretation or flexing, making some exception or something?
Not precisely, but there are solutions, right? So remember, the Ketubot itself was called Tikkun Olam, was a remedy for the inequality between the husband and wife with regards to the finances. Mm-hmm. What the rabbis were able to do, and many did later on, is create Tanaim, create more preconditions before the marriage took place, so that the husband would have less claim over the woman's property. So,
For example.
well, so for example, you could have the thing that says if she inherits money, it remains 100% under her control.
In the Ketubah, consider.
Well, not in the Ketubah. You write it tonight before you do the Ketubah signing, and they would make contracts. We still have records of these from the Middle Ages and before.
Today,
Well, still today as well. But I'm saying nowadays most people don't use their main Ketubah if they go to divorce court. But back then that was the main document they used, and so they did write things like that in order to protect the woman's property, or more importantly, to protect the woman's family's property. Mm-hmm. Right? So let's imagine my daughter's getting married, and I am going, well, I want to leave her for my grandchildren a $1 million trust fund, right? I should be so lucky. Well, I don't want her husband to get his hands on it. Right? Maybe he's a nice guy, fine, but I want that money to go to my grandchildren. And I don't want it to go for his boat. I don't want it to go anywhere else. I want it to go only through her to my kids. So you create a legal instrument before they even get married that says any money I give to her remains in her name only for her exclusive use and will be inherited only by her children. And you could create that in the ancient world.
So that's
just like the modern.
Developing from Rabban Gamliel.
Well, that sentiment.
Conditions.
Right, that sentiment is there.
He set all the conditions.
Well, many rabbis were uncomfortable with how this worked and created conditions that would become a legal apparatus to prevent misuse of this. But if you didn't have those, then this was the halakha, right? So you were only protected if those conditions had been written before the ketubah was signed.
So if you are not a learner person,
you could be in trouble. Yeah, you could be in trouble.
But couldn't those instruments potentially deprive the husband of the use effects?
Well, yes, absolutely.
And doesn't he have a right to the use effects?
He has the right to the use of fruct if it hasn't been prohibited to him.
Really prohibited to him.
There were cases where the family would make the husband take a vow before getting married that he would not use any property that she inherited or the usufruct of it, right? That he would not be able to touch the interest. So yeah, that you can do all sorts of legal structuring to prevent him from getting access. And as long as it's done before he married under that condition, he's stuck with it even after you're dead and not around to enforce it, because the court will enforce it.
So I thought last week we were talking about how they added to the dowry because they assumed he would get the use effect.
And that would all be negotiable, right? That's default. But once you take off the default gloves, you can write the contract to say whatever you like. As long as it's not deliberately exploitative, as we saw with, this is the ketubah, but say that you already got half of it, so I don't have to owe you as much. Once you get to that, then that breaks. All right, we need to finish this up. So now they're married.
If it fell to her after she wed, this and this agree that if she sold or she gave, that the husband takes it from the hand of the purchasers.
All right, so
But
Beit Hillel,
we learned the opposite. We learned that she had land in the past,
right?
and every product from their land went to her, and everything that she sold went to her. And if she divorced
Hold on.
the husband, she keep that property that she came from the dad. That's what we learned. I don't remember which.
So she's a very lucky woman. She has received 3 different pieces of land in her life. Right? The first piece of land she received while she was single. When she receives this piece of land, she can buy and sell it before she gets married, however she feels. She actually changes once she's married. But before she gets married, she can do whatever she wants. Right? Land she receives while betrothed, Beit Hillel, Beit Shammai, they're arguing about it. But they basically do agree that if she sells it or gives it away while betrothed, it's legal. Right? It may not be what they want, but it's legal. Once she's married and she receives the land, she can't sell that piece of land without her husband's permission. And if she does, right, if she goes into the marketplace and says, hey, who wants to buy an acre of land? And someone gives her 100 for it, the husband can go back to the guy and say, here's your 100, give me back the land. I'm canceling that sale.
But can she keep the product, the money from that money, for example, the product, if
No, the money has to go back to
let's say that she sell the avocado for the tree.
the produce.
All the products.
Well, the produce. Well, let's continue. Right, we got to get more detail. Keep reading. Because we're going to get to the produce handling in probably Mishnah 2 and more.
I have 2 daughters. Okay. Before she wed, Rabbi Gamliel says, if she sold or she gave, it is valid.
Right, go ahead and keep reading.
Rabbi Hanina ben Akavia said, they said before Rabbi Gamliel, since he acquired the woman, should he not acquire the property? He said to them, we are embarrassed around the new, and you impose on us the old.
All right, so Rabban Gamliel was arguing that even land that she received while married, she still had the right to use however she wanted, right? That the act is legally valid. And then we get this argument from Rabbi Hanina ben Akavia to say, but I thought that once he married her, he got all her property. And that's where Rabban Gamliel is saying, again, look, I'm not comfortable with you telling me that she can't buy and sell the land or sell the land up to her own discretion. Don't tell me about the stuff that she was forced to give him once she got married because it became his property upon marriage. Right? Again, he's uncomfortable with how many financial rights a woman is giving up when she gets married. And this guy's asking about the smaller problem, which is the piece of land that she inherits or is given after marriage. He's even more upset by the fact that the stuff she had before marriage is becoming part of her husband's estate. So again, we're going to see that they are trying to protect a woman's rights, but they also are recognizing the economic reality of their day, that the property was bundled under the husband's guidance because of the way the social economic structure was formed.
So that goes against our condition.
Yes, as a matter of rule. Again, you can write as your contract whatever you like. But as a matter of default, Rabban Gamliel is not the winner in this.
So if a woman receives something,
she doesn't have the right to sell it without her husband's permission.
But get the products.
We're going to do that more next week.
As in next
right. The produce is coming in later Mishnayot. Now you can read ahead. It's okay. All right. Good night, everyone.
He's entitled to the product.